Hey everybody, welcome back. Happy Saturday. So if you've been here for a while, you already know this about me. I'm a huge advocate for immigrants. I care deeply about their dignity, their safety, and their right to build a life here. But I'm also honest about this. We do need serious immigration reform. The system we have right now is broken, it's outdated, it's inconsistent, and it's often cruel without actually making us safer. It fails the people trying to come in, and it fails the immigrant communities we already have here. So today I want to talk about a new immigration blueprint that's been released by a group called the Immigration Policy Fellows. And this isn't a political pitch. It's a report drafted after 8 months of work by former high-ranking officials who served across multiple administrations, people who've actually run the system and understand how it operates from the inside. So according to their report, they believe the current federal immigration system is, and I'm going to put the quotes up here, being dismantled and weaponized under the Trump administration, and that bold policy solutions are imperative to design and build a new, effective, forward-looking approach for the country. And just to be clear here before we dive in, I'm not here to promote it or tear it down. I haven't fully had a chance to digest it yet and look about how I feel about it. So my goal today is just to lay it out, what they're proposing, explain how it compares to what we currently have, and then get all of your thoughts, right? And this is as much as a learning exercise for me as it is a breakdown for anyone out there who's trying to understand what real reform could look like, at least with this plan. So with that said, let's go through these ideas one by one. Let's start with enforcement against undocumented people already living in the U.S. So right now, millions of undocumented people have been here for years, sometimes decades, right? They work, they pay taxes, they raise U.S. citizen kids, but they have no legal pathway to step forward and fix their status. Under current DHS enforcement, the reality is harsh. I mean, we see ICE raids at homes and workplaces, longtime residents detained at routine check-ins, and parents with deep community ties suddenly deported. Enforcement doesn't only go after people with recent serious criminal records. It often sweeps up long-settled residents who happen to cross paths with the system. And because enforcement priorities change every few years with each administration, people live under constant fear and uncertainty. So there's no predictability, just the possibility that any interaction with the government or even with law enforcement could tear their lives apart. So the hyphen proposal introduces a concept they call immigration probation through a 2-year deportation diversion program. So instead of forcing people to hide, this would create a structured legal way for undocumented individuals who aren't public safety threats to come forward. So they'd register, pass background checks, check in regularly, and live openly under clear conditions. In other words, it doesn't erase enforcement, it reorganizes it. It shifts from fear-based raids and random arrests to a managed, accountable process where the government knows who people are and can focus its resources on genuine threats, not on families who've been here quietly for years. Now, let's talk about how long someone can live in the U.S. and still be deported. In the current system, there's no statute of limitations on deportation. If you cross the border without authorization 20 years ago or overstayed a visa 15 years ago, that violation never expires, right? Even if you've lived here peacefully, worked, and never been convicted of a crime, you can still be removed if you get picked up by immigration authorities. That means millions of people live in a permanent state of legal vulnerability, right? Even if they've been here longer than some natural-born citizens have been alive, the law treats them as if they just arrived yesterday. So the hyphen blueprint suggests borrowing a concept we already use in other areas of law, a statute of limitations. So their idea is that if a non-citizen has lived in the U.S. for 10 years or more without a criminal conviction, DHS should forbear enforcement against them. So meaning it would generally stop trying to deport them, aside from special exceptions. The impact of that is huge, right? It recognizes that time and ties matter, that someone who's lived here a decade, put down roots, and stayed out of trouble is fundamentally different from a recent arrival. And practically, it allows the government to shift its resources away from longtime residents and toward actual public safety and national security risks. Okay. So now let's look at legal immigration, people coming in through visas. So right now, almost everything is controlled at the federal level. Visa caps for workers are set by Congress. Bureaucrats in Washington make decisions, and states and cities, the ones actually dealing with worker shortages, have almost no direct say. So what happens then? You get farmers who can't find enough workers, hospitals in rural areas that can't fill nursing positions, and small towns that are literally shrinking, all while there are people abroad who would gladly take those jobs if they had a legal pathway in. But the system is so rigid and backed up that local needs get ignored often. So the hyphen proposal would open up a new channel, state and local visa sponsorship. So under this model, a state or even a local community could sponsor immigrants directly to fill documented workforce gaps. If a state can show with real data that it needs more healthcare workers, teachers, or agricultural laborers, they could bring in people specifically to meet those needs under a program designed in partnership with the federal government, but driven by local realities. So instead of everything being stuck in a federal bottleneck, immigration becomes a tool for local economic planning. Immigration policy wouldn't just be a culture war issue in DC, it would be something mayors, governors, and communities could actually use to solve real problems on the ground. Finally, let's talk about asylum, people coming here seeking protection from persecution or violence. So right now, the asylum system is overwhelmed and deeply dysfunctional. Many asylum seekers are held for months or even years in detention centers, often in poor conditions while they wait for overburdened immigration courts to hear their cases. Others are released but pushed into a backlog that now includes millions of pending cases. That means people fleeing real danger can wait years for a decision, living in limbo, while people with weak or fraudulent claims can use that same backlog to stay indefinitely. So nobody gets clarity, and the system loses credibility, especially with what we have going on right now. So the hyphen blueprint proposes a major shift. Instead of defaulting to detention in jail-like facilities, it calls for reception centers, places designed to process people, not punish them. It would also empower trained asylum officers, not just immigration judges, to decide many claims. That alone could cut the processing time way down, with most cases being resolved in about 60 to 180 days instead of dragging on for years sometimes. The idea is to make the system faster, fairer, and more humane. People with legitimate claims get protection much more quickly, and those without valid claims get a decision, and if necessary, removal on a realistic timeline. It's going to attempt to reduce suffering and reduce chaos. So when you put all of this together, you see a clear contrast between the system we have and the system they're proposing. So right now, our immigration system is built on fear, delay, and unpredictability. Long-term residents live with the constant threat of arrest or deportation. There's no recognition in law that time, ties, and clean records should matter. States and cities are stuck with worker shortages they can't really fix. And asylum seekers are trapped in a bottleneck that fails both them and the rule of law. So the blueprint from the hyphen immigration policy fellows tries to replace that with clarity, accountability, and local flexibility. A structured immigration probation instead of terror and hiding. A statute of limitations that acknowledges reality for longtime residents. Visa pathways that let states and local communities bring in the workers they actually need. An asylum process that is faster, more humane, and more honest. And this isn't some open borders fantasy. It's a technical governance plan written by people who have actually run the system and seen where it breaks. You don't have to agree with every piece of it, right? But it's an example of moving the conversation away from slogans and toward actual solutions. So I want to hear from you. Do you think state-sponsored visas are a smart way to deal with worker shortages? Would a statute of limitations on deportation make the system fairer, or do you worry it goes too far? So let's talk about the policy, not just the politics in the comments. Obviously, this is a plan put forward. It's definitely not an easy or even a short-term fix, or something that's going to end up tomorrow happening. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and you guys have an awesome Saturday.